sympathy. I can't believe I got another bill to pay. Why can't I win the lottery? Don't know what's stopping me. My boss is talking me cause I let again. Take your earrings out, put on your damn tie. I hate waiting tables, man, I'd rather die. I just wanna be home next to you, making some trouble. I don't wanna work another double. 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 Do I have to work so hard to make a dollar? Why do I have to wear dress shoes and a collar to impress the man? Boy, I doesn't even pay the bills and meet the ends. I'm trying to make it, work a day and night, but without overtime it's too tight for the lots of the electric bill, not to mention the phone. So I'll be a little late getting home. I gotta work another double. I don't wanna work another double. I don't wanna work another double. I don't wanna work another double. Minimum wage just ain't making it. Every dollar I make, somebody's taking it. I just want a little time for me and you, but without 60 hours or more, I feel bored. So when I'm laying next to you at night, I'm dreaming. When I turn out the lights, dreaming. I'm not having to struggle and being with you, girl. I don't wanna work another double. 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 I'm trying to make it, work a day and night, but without overtime it's too tight for the lights and the electric bill, not to mention the phone. So I'll be a little late getting home. I gotta work another double. I don't wanna work another double. I don't wanna work another double. I'm tired of slaving. I don't wanna work another double. I don't wanna work another double. I don't wanna work another double. I don't wanna work another double.
For this year's State of the Riverway report, we decided to focus on large events that are happening, but events and opportunities that will change really Sauk Prairie and how we've operated, the number of people who live here, but we're also focusing on things that can support our families. So as you watch the Riverway report, I hope that you'll think of ways that you can partner with us to support our efforts. It truly does take each and every one of us to make these projects happen, but we're pretty excited about some of the things that we have for 2024, and we hope you enjoy this year's video. Thank you.
The Sauk Prairie Riverway is a community made up of 3 villages and 7 townships, representing a population of just over 16,000. We work with Sauk, Columbia, and Dane counties due to our proximity along the Wisconsin River. The community has a joint comprehensive plan that guides our work, and we rely on collaborative partnerships between the villages, townships, school district, the county, our Chamber of Commerce, and local businesses.
I'm Jeff Wright, and I'm proud to be the superintendent. In 2020, Sauk Prairie again authorized the borrowing of $65 million to fund improvements to the community outdoor pool, construct a new stadium, and make athletic improvements on the middle school and high school campus, to build a new aquatics facilities with pools for students, teams, and community use, build an addition onto the popular River Arts Center, and completely renovate our high school, which was first opened for the class of 1964. The school district is so proud of how the projects have turned out. Our new Eagle Stadium is not only hosting high school and community events, but it has also been selected by the WIAA to host sectional soccer games, sectional track and field events, and neutral site football games. These events bring thousands of people to the Sauk Prairie community. Our new aquatics facility can accommodate community classes, including water aerobics and toddler swimming lessons throughout the day. Our physical education and competition pool stays busy as well and was selected by the WIAA to host sectional competitions for both boys and girls swimming. The inside of the high school has been completely transformed to better meet the needs of modern teaching and learning. This past summer, the commons, kitchen, and library were completely renovated, and Leola Hall, a multi-purpose performance and meeting space built on the south side of the River Art Center. Our advanced manufacturing, metal shop, wood shop, and drafting classrooms will be expanded and renovated. This work is funded in part by a $2.44 million grant from the state of Wisconsin. This grant not only funds these expanded spaces, it is helping the district purchase equipment to prepare our current and future workforce in agricultural science, advanced manufacturing, and medical careers. These new spaces attract visitors to Sauk Prairie. Our schools are better able to serve our students and families, and our new programs are helping us offer courses that match student interests and community needs.
In addition to brick and mortar work, the wellness of Sauk Prairie residents is a top priority in all our planning. We are connected with over 5 miles of community trails leading to the Great Sauk State Trail. Sauk and Dane County just announced that the proposed connector recreational bridge over the Wisconsin River is fully funded. This will allow riders to connect from Sauk Prairie to Dane County trails to our east. The bridge's construction will begin in 2025. The Village of Sauk City and Sauk County collaborated and received the largest TAP grant ever awarded, which was $5,587,672 for this project. Thank you to everyone involved in making the Great Sauk State Trail an amazing asset for our community. Speaking of wellness, Sauk Prairie School District's mental health programs received a big boost recently. Sauk Prairie was one of only 2 in the state of Wisconsin to receive a U.S. Department of Education school-based mental health grant. The $4.66 million grant will allow our school district to increase collaboration and coordination across education, mental health, healthcare, and law enforcement agencies to better meet student and family needs by streamlining service delivery and eliminating redundancies. Some of our recently completed projects include Phase 1 of Culver Community Park, which is 67 acres of active and passive recreation, offering year-round recreational opportunities and events for all ages and abilities.
Sauk Prairie community over the last 5+ years have been transformed through donations and investments into our parks, trails, and open spaces. Hi, I'm John Lehan, the Director of Community Education and Recreation for the Sauk Prairie area. Research has shown that the benefits of parks and trails include improving physical and mental health and wellness, creating conservation and resiliency through protections of land, water, trees, and open spaces, increasing property values, improving economic development for the region, and spurring tourism through local park and trail activity. Most critically, parks and recreation amenities are the cornerstones to improving a region's quality of life, a significant factor in enticing employers and workers to an area. When combined with the ability to deliver healthier and happier communities, the powerful impact parks, trails, and recreation has on economic activity highlights the fact that park and recreation agency offerings are not merely a nice-to-have luxury government service. Instead, they transform our towns and our counties into vibrant and prosperous communities for all. An economic impact study by the Outdoor Industry Association shows cycling contributes to $1.4 billion to Wisconsin and provides more than 13,000 jobs.
Collaboration occurs daily in Sauk Prairie. After recently working to address our rental housing shortage, municipal and school leaders were able to identify 40 acres owned by the school district to sell to developers with a contractual agreement to build an affordable, multi-family housing development in Sauk Prairie. This is the largest investment in housing in our community's history, with the development agreement outlining 6 buildings with 15 to 20 apartments each, with rents set below market rate for 10 years, 5 buildings with 30 to 40 luxury apartments with a pool and clubhouse, and 32-unit owner-occupied duplex condos. Other housing developments in the works include the reuse of the Wellspring campus of Sauk Prairie Healthcare and continued multifamily housing units and condos along the riverfront in Sauk City. With progress in meeting our housing goals, we have been working diligently over the last 18 months to address our childcare desert status. In 2021, elected officials, local business owners, and the Chamber of Commerce conducted a survey to better understand the impact childcare has on families within our community. The following comments were captured from area employees. 60% of the respondents said they spend 1 to 2 hours each month while at work making alternate childcare arrangements, causing stress on the family. 45% reported that their children stay with unlicensed providers who care for 4 or more unrelated children. And 55% reported that childcare costs are a main family stressor. By the end of the year, we hope to formally announce that Sauk Prairie will be opening a public and privately funded childcare center serving 150 children, infants to 4K. This center will allow us to serve families and area workers, but also set a standard for what early educators should be compensated, all while increasing early intervention efforts and preparing our students, our future workforce, for success in school and in life. Our community experienced some big wins in 2023, but we recognize that international instability, remote work options, and mindset have a large impact on our business leaders and local success. Chamber Board President Todd Lisansky and Board Member Casey Koenig recently discussed how to navigate some of these challenges.
Hello, Sauk Prairie. Casey Koenig here. I'm a board member with the Chamber of Commerce, as well as work for Bank of Prairie to Sac. I'm here with Todd Lisansky today, Chamber Board President and manufacturing professional. So Todd, we know in today's world that a major obstacle is workforce, retention and recruitment. All of the businesses that I talk to, this is a main priority for them. So can you tell me a little bit about some strategies for retention and recruitment, and then how do you keep, your current workers motivated?
Yeah, sure. So for sure, recruiting, retention, probably the number one thing for any business that I've been with or talked with. From a recruiting standpoint, it's really about leaving no stone unturned. You got to go out there. It's about relationships, collaborating with your local academia, your school districts, your tech colleges, four-year colleges, YA program, or youth apprentice programs, registered apprentice programs. There's programs for folks with disabilities that can add an incredible value to your team, like Project Search or Aptive. There's programs for veterans returning to the workforce, for folks that have been incarcerated returning to the workforce. Again, really, you can't leave any stone unturned. Whatever you can do from a retention, motivation standpoint, listen to your team, listen to your employees. What are their needs? What are their activities? I think some of the old school command and control type environments, that's not where we're at today.
So Todd, in my world, we talk a lot about inflation, interest rates for the Federal Reserve's there, and hopefully they're on the right track now. But wanted to hear your perspective in the manufacturing world, dealing on a larger scale, bringing it back here to the local economy, how you dealing with, those challenges with inflation and with pricing margin and logistics.
Yeah, so again, everything comes back to relationships. When you talk about the value stream and the value chain of any business, product, service, you name it. You have a customer, you have what you provide as a business, you have your suppliers, your vendors, and how do we treat them as partners? Not that old school, they serve me, those vendors serve me. No, they don't serve me. These are my partners. And the same goes with customers. If you're trying to understand what a customer in Kazakhstan or Ukraine is experiencing, you can look at the news and you can watch that, but we all know how that goes. The news is, what people think of Wisconsin and Sauk City, if they're not in Sauk City, Wisconsin, is entirely different than what the reality is. So you got to partner with people, partner with your customers, listen to them, partners with your suppliers, listen to them. How do you make it truly a relationship?
Going on that too, how do you expand the search? Have you had to, in your past, are you seeing companies going out to find new partners because of the inflationary world, and this is kind of a new market?
Yeah, I think on the supplier side, certainly, if everything that happened through COVID and supply chain constraints, if anything, it taught us not to be too invested in one source, right? You've got to have a backup source. You've got to have an alternative plan. And sometimes that comes from just expanding locally. Sometimes you do it yourself. You get a little more vertical. In other cases, you look elsewhere. The world is becoming very, very small, and there's opportunities. And I think a lot of folks, especially locally, it does seem like folks are a little bit nervous or concerned about, can I source that in Vietnam, or can I source that in South Africa? Can I source that in India? These are some of the forefronts as an alternative to China or as an alternative to insourcing, and there's many others. But you really, in any sourcing relationship, if you don't go there, if you don't invest the time and energy to work face to face, yes, you can do a lot over video, you can do a lot over Teams or Zoom, but at the end of the day, it's still about people doing business with people.
So we just talked about how you interact with your vendors and your partners, and based on conversations, the world is ever evolving and changing. So in today's world, right now, we're heading into 2024, what types of business practices are you modifying, or how are you operating in a business to deal with your clients' needs?
That's a good question. What's interesting about that is I think the challenges and the fears that businesses face today are really not all that different. You need to have the people first, right? You need to have the people to get the work done. Sometimes you need to find some automation in whatever work you're doing. And that automation could come from a lot of different ways. It could be a robotic welder or a robotic system in a manufacturing environment. It could be using AI in some sort of service situation. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to put together the most quality product or service, deliver it in an effective and timely manner to the end customers. The world is changing at an incredible pace compared to what it was even just 2 or 3 years ago. And I mentioned AI. That's a scary concept for a lot of people. But at the end of the day, we need to have a vision. Each business needs to have a vision of why they're doing the work they're doing. And they got to engage their people and find a way to enable their voice, their interest, their perspective, and then do what you need to do and take a little bit of risk. You got to take a little bit of risk if you're going to have that growth mindset.
So is AI going to take my job?
No. AI is not going to take your job, I don't believe. Just like a robotic welder doesn't take a welder's job. Ask any company who's added automation to their business. They need more people. And they need higher paid people to operate and to not only operate the equipment, but to program it, to maintain it. And I don't think AI is any different than that. I think you're going to have roles that evolve because of AI. But what AI doesn't provide is the empathy and the interaction that you do as a person.
So Todd, tell me a little more about how diverse industries can follow the same business practices or similar business practices?
Yeah, so I'm sure most people, pay attention to their particular industry news, the threads that come out. You want to look at macroeconomic type factors that affect behaviors, that affect, leading indicators maybe that drive your customers, drive your employees, your team. But at the end of the day, it really is an open source world. Everything is so easy to come by. We can learn about our competitors just by going online. It's so transparent. But what's interesting to me is that, you have situations where businesses feel like they're unique, but they're really not fundamentally any different. I mean, think about Culver's. Think about an emergency room at a hospital. Think about a manufacturer. At the end of the day, we're trying to process things quickly, efficiently, accurately, at a high quality level. And when you think about what folks are fundamentally doing in each of those situations, it's the same.
Well, thank you, Todd, for your time and wisdom in this interview. Any parting words for the business leaders here in the community?
Yeah, I think, everything you thought you knew yesterday, maybe what you did, how you did it, you really have to be willing to blow that up and try something new. Really focus on why you do what you do, how you're going to engage your team and enable them in a culture to go get it, to go accomplish that, why you're doing what you're doing. And get out and talk with people, collaborate, learn and grow together with people, whether it's in your industry or in a parallel or a completely different industry. There's always things that we can learn from one another. And when you really collaborate and work together, you find ways to grow the pie, and your piece will get bigger and better.
Thank you. And thank you, Sauk Prairie area. Appreciate you coming out today, and we look forward to seeing employees from each of your businesses at our events this year, and we have a great training seminar called Coffee and Coaching coming up that we would like to see great attendance at. Thanks again.
Our business community is strong, collaborating with schools and municipal leaders. We are excited about recent growth and for the plans that we have in place for our community. Because when we work together, we can accomplish a great amount and continue to soar.
Where adventure comes naturally.
So some of you may not realize, whenever I moved to Wisconsin 15 years ago, I came from the human service industry. And so community work was completely new. Running a chamber of commerce, never had done. And I remember our economic development committee had kind of not met in a few years, and I said, I should probably pull these people together. I don't really know what they do in economic development, but I'm willing to give it a go. And as I look at Tim Homar back then, he was on our board, that committee, and I said, this is the boringest committee we run. And so it kind of picked up that I would say, this is the boring committee. And Tim reminded me one day, he said, this is the impactful committee. And as I sit and watch this video, and I think back to all of the projects that we have done over the years, it truly is an impactful work that we do that changes the face and the landscape of the community in which we live. But the work that that committee does is long, and it's hard, and you hit lots of roadblocks. But the video this year reminds me that for over 8-9 years, we talked about housing, how to increase our housing stock, multifamily rentals, desperately needed. And just when we decided to give up because we didn't know what else to do and turn our efforts to childcare, out of the blue comes 2, 3, 4 developers saying, I hear you need housing in Sauk Prairie. So those conversations that we had around that little boring table yielded 5 other people to tell 5 more people, and all of a sudden people come to us. In closing, I want to talk about the child care model that you saw, because it only happens if, again, the people of Sauk Prairie come together. We had an opportunity late December we realized that the state of Wisconsin will be doing they call it a non-grant, a non-state grant, to help with any capital needs in community. And if you're in a grant world, you realize those grants don't come along that often. But the grant requires a dollar for dollar match. That child care center, the parking lot, the architecture, all the things that go with it, will be about a $4.5 million project. In the last 3 weeks, the administrators, a small group of people, we have been able to go out and fundraise $1,803,000 just in 3 weeks from this community. We're trying to get to 1.9 million so that we can apply for this grant for 1.9 to at least pay for the building itself. We need letters of support. If you have people that are interested in helping us get to the finish line, 97,000 if my math is correct, I could really use your support. Alan, raise your hand. Heidi, Jeff Wright, myself, we will come talk to anyone that we need to talk to about this project, because we know that much like housing has done, childcare has caused leakage in our community. And what do I mean by that? If you're trying to recruit an employee that can't find childcare in our community, and they have to drive to Middleton, which some of our families do every morning, and then drive back, drive to Baraboo, drive back, soon they'll just find a job in those communities. So I ask that you be a partner with us to help, but I also ask, stay on top of what your municipalities are doing and projects that are coming before them. Advocate for smart growth in our community. And if you would like to get involved with the most impactful committee that your Chamber of Commerce offers, give me a call and I'll get a seat at the table for that. In closing, before we turn it over to Dr. Deller, I would like to thank Alex Endress. Alex, raise your hand. She produced this year's video and did a great job, and I would not want that job at all. I can just give a vision. She makes it happen, so thank you for that. And then Todd Lasansky and Casey Koenig, thank you so much for doing the interview. And when we ask you to complete your survey, please do that. The reason we offered solutions today is because last year's survey results, some of you said, it's great to hear what's going on, but can you give us ideas on how to address some of those things? So that's why we incorporated that. So thank you so much. And again, it is always a pleasure to work with Dr. Stephen Deller. He is an economist with UW-Madison, and he is here to give us the 2024 outlook on our economy. Stephen.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Good, excellent, thank you. Before I get going into the boring economic data that I find fascinating, but will probably put some of you to sleep, so if you need to get up and get coffee, please, I won't take it personally. I want to, based on the video, I want to say two things. One is the engine of economic growth and development is innovation. The manufacturer that was talking about always looking for new ways to do things. And I think that's innovation. Okay? And innovation really comes from people. Okay? You're the innovators. Now, what do you base innovation on? You base it on information. And where do you get that information from? From pointy-headed academics like me, or from your peers? How many of you have heard the phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know? It's that networking. Okay? In academia, we call it social capital. It's your networks. It's attending forums like this. It's attending workshops and learning from your peers, reaching out and asking questions. And I think what the Chamber is trying to do is to provide a forum for you to be able to do that. Okay, so actually saying, this is all great information, but what do I do with it? Okay, and this is where that innovation comes into play. The second thing is that increasingly communities are thinking more in terms of economic growth and development. They're thinking less in terms of jobs, jobs, jobs. I mean, some of the comments are saying, you know, we can't fill the jobs we have, so why are we trying to promote more jobs? It is focusing more on people, okay? Sometimes it's referred to as placemaking. And the idea here is really, what can we do to make this a community where people want to live here? And I think some of the things that Sauk Prairie is doing is really quite innovative in terms of trying to improve the quality of life. Addressing things like, we're investing in the school, not so that we produce labor for the local economy, but rather this is the kind of community, a type of school that people are proud of and they want to send their kids to. Okay, investing in childcare, because it's an important piece of kind of what makes this a good, high quality of life place. The investment in the parks and the recreational services. Those are all making this a better place to live. And because of that, people will want to live here. That will drive growth and development, okay? But there could be some roadblocks, and some of those roadblocks I think we'll talk about a little bit, okay? But one of the key indicators, I'll do it the old-fashioned way. This is going to be kind of the outline real quickly, some basic economic trends. We'll talk about foreign markets for just a little bit here. Housing issues, again, the one issue that won't go away. The macroeconomic forecast, okay, what do we think the next year is going to look like? And then what does all this mean for Sauk County and the larger economy? The first thing to kind of look at is what's happening to the population. Okay, this is kind of the granddaddy measure of economic growth and development. And this is looking at Sauk County compared to Wisconsin and the Great Lakes states, and it goes back to 1970. And you can see that starting in about 1990, the population growth rate in Sauk County has been very strong, okay? Up until about the Great Recession, and you can see after the Great Recession, it slowed down a little bit. But still, Sauk County is growing quite rapidly in terms of population. People want to live here, okay? You can see the effects of COVID, and you can see Wisconsin's kind of plateau. Matter of fact, the census just released the state's population estimates for 2023, and the state's population grew by 20,000 people. Well, it's positive, it's going in the right direction, but if you were to put that on this chart, it'd be a flat line, okay? And we're asking the question, why isn't the state growing more than that? Some people will look at the weather out there, okay, and say that. My daughter, who has lived in New Orleans for 4 years, wants to move back to Wisconsin. You know why she wants to move back? Have you ever been in New Orleans in July? That's why, okay? The change of season, she misses that. She wants to come back to that. Okay, so people look at the weather and they go, okay? This is net migration. This is the net migration for Sauk County. And this is, the red line is 1950 to 1960, the green is 1960 to 1970, and so on and so on. There's a pattern. I don't know what happened in the, anybody around in the 1950s? I don't know what was happening in the 1950s, but let's take that one and throw that one out, okay? But notice that there's a real distinct pattern here. There's positive net population migration for younger people up to about the age of 14, then it drops off, there's net out-migration, and then it bounces back. And across almost all the age categories, it's positive. People are moving into Sauk County. That's what's driving the population growth that we're seeing. It's people moving in. Why do they want to move here? Well, historically it'd be jobs, but increasingly it's quality of life. People want to live here because this is a good place to live, okay? That out-migration in the age category of 19 to 24, what's that? Going off to college. That's going off, seeing the bright city lights, and that's good, go. Experience that, right? Then come on back. Now, what do they bring? It's called boomerang migration. Now, what do they bring back when they come back? knowledge. They bring back new ways of thinking about things. They bring back new ideas. They bring back a broader network of people. Okay? Now, how receptive is the community to those ideas? If my brother-in-law was a career Navy person, and he moved back to his hometown and wanted to get involved in local city government, he brought in a wealth of information. But he basically was like, we don't want to hear that. That community's going to struggle. Okay? They missed an opportunity. So it's really important that when you see these people moving back in, welcome them into the community and embrace them. The director of your chamber is a perfect example of that. Okay? This is compared to the Wisconsin average. So you can kind of see here that Wisconsin overall is kind of, you get some out-migration of the younger, a little bit of move back. You know, there's not a whole lot of people moving in and out of Wisconsin. There's more people moving out than there are moving in. Okay? And this is a question, why is this happening for the state of Wisconsin? Now, another issue is commuting. Okay, this is from the census, and this is for Sauk County, and this is the share of workers who commute out of the county for work. Okay? What's been happening since 2016? It's trending upwards. People are moving into Sauk County, but they may be commuting out of the county for work. Okay? Is Sauk County becoming a bedroom community of places like Madison? Okay? This is the commuting patterns. This is the 5-year average from 2016 to 2020. The census has not updated this. Okay, so this is a little old, but it's not that old. What this is looking at is the table that's on the left side. You live in Sauk County, but this is where you work. This is where you commute to work. Okay? The table on the right side is you live someplace else and you come into Sauk County. Look at the net flows. Okay? There's just over 10,000 people that are commuting into Sauk County for work. There's about 8,300, 8,400 that are commuting out. Essentially, Sauk County is a net gainer of commuters. There are more people driving in to Sauk County to work than there are going out. Okay? Now, where are most of these folks commuting to? I'm surprised that they're, going into Dane County, Madison, Middleton, 4,700. I'm surprised. I thought that'd be a lot more. I really did think that'd be a lot more. Okay? But notice that there are about 2,300 people that are coming from Dane County up into Sauk. How many of you drive up and down the Highway 12 in the morning during commute time? The flow of traffic, right? There's more cars coming this way than there are going that way. Now, Columbia County, that's the Dells. That's Lake Delton. Okay, how many people actually know? If you're driving through Lake Delton into Wisconsin Dells, do you know where that county line is? It's the river? Yeah, you learn something new every day. I didn't know that. Okay? From an economic perspective, it's irrelevant. The county line is there, it's irrelevant. Okay, so that Columbia County is kind of the Lake Delton, the Wisconsin Dells kind of phenomenon. Okay? Now, one thing that a colleague of mine, Matt Kears, has been working on is the notion of stretch commuting. Stretch commuting is defined as people that commute more than 50 miles one way for work. Okay? In 2006, you can see the percent of folks that were stretch commuting. Not that many. Now, what Matt did is that he did this every 2 years so that we can trace it over time. The most current year that we have is 2019. And look at what's happened to the share of people that are stretch commuting. It's exploding. Okay? That's why I think that not that one, when the more current data, I think we're going to see more people commuting in and out of the county. Okay? That's why there's regional cooperation of saying, we don't work in isolation here, we're part of a larger economy. I think it's really important. Okay? And so working with Middleton, working with, does Madison play well? I remember having a conversation with the economic director of the city of Madison, and said, I'm just curious, how often do you meet with your counterparts in Stoughton? And they looked at me like, never. And it's like, why not? We don't need to. It's like, oh, that's not good. Okay? So stretch commuting, people are willing to drive greater distances for work. Okay? This is the amount of time away from home. This is something that was developed by Harvard and Brown University to kind of track the recovery from the COVID recession. And what this is that Big Brother has been tracking where you're at. They're using this thing. They're tracking this. Okay? And guess who Big Brother is? Google. I actually turn off my GPS on this thing because I see this and it makes me really paranoid. Okay? Well, what this is there's two things here. One is the top line is the time away from home. Okay? And you can see COVID hit, people went into lockdown mode, and then the recovery, we're kind of back up to where we were. Okay? But the second line is time away from work. This is a measure of remote work. Okay, you notice that people start working from home, it's starting to come back, and we're still down about 13%. Now this ended about a year ago. They stopped the project about a year ago because we kind of recovered from COVID, okay? But I think that this trend of about 13% still not, time away from work is going to continue to maintain, okay? This idea of remote work. I think what we're doing is we're moving towards a hybrid model. How many of you work from home a couple of days a week? Okay? Do you think that's going to kind of stay? Or do you think we're all going to be going back to the office? A lot of companies are still trying to figure this one out. But I think what we're going to do is I think we're going to end up with this kind of hybrid model. Is that some folks who can work from home, you can work from home 3-4 days a week, and then you got to come into the office. Okay? Now, if we look at the census data, all right, this is time away from a share of workers who work from home. Well, there's always been a number of people that kind of have home-based businesses. They work from home. Okay? But notice that it's gone up significantly since COVID. And this is a 5-year average, and this is Sauk County. And I think that as we move further into time, I think that share is going to go up. Okay, we're going to see more people that are going to be working from home. Okay? Now I'm going to come back to that because I think it's going to have a long-term influence for Sauk County. Because if you look at like stretch commuting and then hybrid work, there's this pattern that's starting to come up in the data. Now this is employment growth. Okay? And you can see again in the 1980s and the 1990s, up until about the Great Recession of 2008, employment in Sauk County was just booming. Just generating jobs, a lot of jobs. Then the Great Recession hit and it basically went flat. There hasn't been a whole lot of employment growth occurring since the end of the Great Recession. You can see COVID, you can see the bounce back from COVID. Okay? But if you look at the growth of employment and the growth of population, we're producing a lot more jobs than we have people to fill these jobs. Okay? One of the ways that we look at this is this thing called the population employment ratio. We simply take the total population divided by the total number of jobs. Now, this does not account for commuting patterns. Okay? So this is the number of jobs in Sauk County, the number of people in Sauk County. Okay? It's a simple measure. Notice how it's been downward trending, okay, up until about 2000. Then it kind of plateaus and stayed the same. Okay, we've been generating more jobs than people. How were we able to? How is from a macroeconomic perspective? How were we able to do that? During that time period is when women started entering the labor force en masse. So we had this pool of labor, women, that were essentially now entering the job market, the labor force, and taking those jobs. We've tapped out that pool of labor. The question is now, where are the people going to come to fill these jobs? Notice that in Sauk County, at one point, there was about 1.2 people for every job. Now, how are you able to do that? Go back to the commuting data. Okay? A lot of these jobs are being taken by people that lived outside the county. Okay? This is a large question that is perplexing a lot of economists. Is that if we continue to generate more jobs, but we're not generating the people to fill these jobs, how are we going to address this? Okay? Immigration policy has to be talked about. The problem is, with all the chaos that's occurring at the southern border, talking about immigration policy right now is just political suicide. So we've kind of talked ourselves into a corner where we can't talk about the one issue that we got to be talking about. Okay? Labor force participation rate. Wisconsinites like to work. Okay? Our labor force participation rate for the state of Wisconsin has always been higher than the national average. But you can see the increase from 1976 up until about 2000, it was trending upwards. That was women entering the labor force largely. It's starting to taper down a little bit, but that's a national trend. Part of that is the demographics, the aging demographics, okay? But there is not this pool of labor that's sitting on the sidelines that we just need to encourage to get back into the labor force. That's not really there are some, but not enough to really make a difference. Okay, so this idea that there's this pool of folks that are just sitting there, that's not really true. Okay? Now, what about the unemployment rate? One of the reasons that we like to look at the unemployment rate so much is because we get it on a monthly basis and we get it fairly currently. So it's the one timely indicator that we get on a fairly regular basis. This is going back to 1976. This is monthly. This is seasonally adjusted for Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, and Iowa. Okay, you can see the recession of the early 1980s. That was really hard for Wisconsin. You can see the Great Recession booming up. You can see COVID. Okay, we basically turned the economy off and then we turned it back on again. Okay. But one of the things I want you to notice that over this long-term time period, the simple average for Wisconsin is slightly above 5%. Okay, that's kind of the long-term average. We're a little better than Illinois. We're a little higher than Minnesota. We're better than Michigan. Iowa's always had really low unemployment rates. Anybody from Iowa? I don't take this personally, but the reason the unemployment rate is so low in Iowa is because nobody wants to live in Iowa. Okay? I have colleagues at Iowa State University. We go back and forth on this kind of stuff. I talk about boomerang migration, and they're like, there's no such thing as boomerang migration, of getting, people that are in their 30s moving back home. Yeah, that's not going to happen. That's because you're in Iowa. Okay, so there's some, okay? But this is more current, okay? This is kind of right before COVID hit, and then it came right back down again. Okay, but look at the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate is really very, very low. Okay? Now, this is kind of looking at notice how it kind of jumped. This is not seasonally adjusted. That's why you see this spikes up and down, okay? See, when you seasonally adjusted, you kind of smooth that out a little bit. This is not seasonally adjusted. This has got two things. One is initial claims. This is when you first get laid off and you initially file for unemployment, right? That's counting. The continued claims is, I've been unemployed, I'm looking for work, I'm not finding anything, I need to continue my unemployment, so I'm filing to keep my unemployment going, okay? You can see the tension within the labor market can kind of really be captured, not so much by the initial claims, but by the continued claims. That's kind of how the job openings going. If there's not a whole lot of job openings, that continuation will tend to be a little bit higher. That's why you can see the Great Recession and kind of the slow recovery from the Great Recession, and then COVID hits, okay? But if you look at past COVID, okay, and this is Wisconsin, notice how low that continuation claims are. People get laid off, they file for unemployment, and then they can find a job pretty easily. Okay. This is an indication, this continued claims being so low from a historical perspective is an indication of how tight our labor market is. Even if you lose your job, you can find another one fairly quickly. Okay? Now, this is a comparison of job openings and the unemployed. Job openings is the green line, and the unemployed is the red line. Notice that from 2011 to about 2016, right, maybe 2015, the number of unemployed was greater than the number of job openings. Okay? We had kind of a surplus of labor, if you will. Okay? Now, what's happening after 2015? The number of job openings, the green line, is greater than the number of unemployed. Okay, so for every job opening that pops up, there's fewer people that are available to fill those jobs. Okay? That's the definition of a labor shortage. Another way of looking at it is that black dash line. That's simply the ratio of the two. When that ratio is below 1, that's essentially saying that there's a surplus of labor. If that ratio goes above 1, that means that there's a labor shortage. So from 2015 up until COVID, we had a tight labor market. COVID hits, and then the recovery. Look at that red line compared to the green line, the number of unemployed compared to the number of openings after we kind of got out of the COVID recession. Okay? That is a labor shortage. That's why those continuation of unemployments is so low. We have more jobs than we have people to fill those jobs. Okay? Now, people are saying that this is a post-COVID phenomenon. No, we were experiencing this before COVID hit. Okay? COVID just kind of turbocharged a little bit because people were rethinking work coming out of COVID. They're rethinking hybrid work, they're rethinking working from home, they're rethinking a lot of things, okay? So we've got a labor shortage, and that's not unique, okay? Now, the unemployment rate. I want to share with this, there's different definitions of the unemployed, okay? In essence, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has 6 different ways to measure unemployment, okay? The simplest one is U1, persons unemployed 15 weeks or longer as a percent of the, that's the narrowest one. And then you can move all the way up until the most comprehensive. Okay? U6 is the total unemployed plus marginally attached workers. Marginally attached means that these are short-term jobs. Okay, I'm hired for a short period of time, and there's no guarantee I'm going to have a job after a short period. Think the construction industry. Okay, those are marginally attached. Plus, total employed that work part-time. Okay, they work part-time, but they really want to work full-time. So this U6 is a much more comprehensive measure of unemployment. The official one that we track is U3. Okay, that's the one that we track. Now, the reason that I'm sharing this with you is that this is, the Bureau of Labor Statistics doesn't update this all the time, so this is kind of an average of through 2023. Okay, look at the unemployment rate, U1, the most restrictive. It's less than 2%. Look at Wisconsin. It's 1%. A 1% unemployment rate. That's alarmingly low. The green bar is the official unemployment rate, and then U6 is the most comprehensive. Okay, look at U5. It's a little bit broader, but it's still less than 4% for the state of Wisconsin. Now remember, what was What was the long-term average unemployment rate? From 76 up until most recent, it's just over 5%. What is it now? It's below 4%. It's pushing 3%. Even if you use the more comprehensive measures, we still have very low unemployment rates. We have a very, very tight labor market. Okay? Now, one of the things that is a potential risk to the economy I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about is foreign exports. Okay? During the video, we're talking about selling to international markets, using international suppliers as input suppliers, okay, kind of the globalization of the economy, okay, that we are moving towards a globalized economy. COVID kind of shocked that a little bit, made us start thinking about it. The other thing is increased tensions with China. Do we really want to be dependent upon China for so many of our parts? Okay, is that a concern? What about what's going on with the Middle East right now, with Ukraine? There's all sorts of risks out there that are associated with international markets. This is the amount of foreign exports for the state of Wisconsin. Okay? We have, what is that, about 20, that's millions of dollars, so that's $20 billion of foreign exports going out of the state of Wisconsin. Okay? I'm surprised that 2022, which is the COVID year, that number is not lower than it is. Even with COVID and all the bottlenecks on international shipping, we still exported a lot. And post-COVID, we're setting record levels of foreign exports. Okay? So that export market is actually expanding. Now, where are we shipping to? Who's our biggest trading partner? Canada, by far. Has been historically, and probably will continue for a long time. Mexico, China, Germany, okay, Ireland, okay? But once you get past those top 3 or 4, it drops off pretty quickly. But Wisconsin is part of an international economy, okay? What's the biggest items that we're exporting? Agricultural, construction, and machinery. The Deere tractor factory that's it's in Dodge County, right? It's that kind of stuff. It's tractors, it's farm equipment. We export a lot of that. Okay? There was some concern because who was one of our biggest buyers of agricultural equipment? Ukraine and Russia. Ugh. Risk. Okay? When we start entering international markets, there's opportunities, but there's also risks. Okay, the other one that's really growing is pharmaceutical. It's the 4th one down from the top, pharmaceutical and medicines. That's really been our growth sector for foreign exports. Okay. Now, what about Sauk County? These are estimates. They're very crude estimates. I would not go to the bank and ask for a loan based on these estimates. Okay, so you got to take them with a grain of salt. Okay. This is millions of dollars of foreign exports. Estimated, the biggest export out of Sauk County is glass product manufacturing made from purchased glass. Do you know what company it is? Cardinal Glass? They're exporting. Okay. Is it exactly $70 million? No. This is an estimate, but it gives you an idea that we do. Sauk County, there is a fair amount of stuff that we're shipping out of the U.S. Now that's in terms of sales. If you look at it in terms of jobs, there's a fair number of jobs here in Sauk County that are dependent upon those foreign exports. Okay? Now the question is that given all the uncertainty with trade with China, the war in the Middle East, Ukraine, this is a risk factor that we have to think about when we think about moving forward. Okay? Now, housing. This is a topic that 9 years, you say? 9 years been talking about housing issues. Okay? Sauk County is not unique in that. Okay? This is all transaction housing price index going back to 1986. And you can see Sauk County. Sauk County follows very closely Columbia and Iowa counties. It had been following Dane until Dane kind of broke away a little bit. You can see the housing bubble that's, when it burst, it triggered the Great Recession. Okay, you can see the recovery, and now what's happened in the last couple of years. It looks like we're going back into another bubble. Okay, the concern is that bubble going to, when is that bubble going to slow down? And if it bursts, are we going to go into another Great Recession? I don't think we're going to go into another Great Recession because of the financial markets that were in place in 2008. We kind of learned our lesson, and those financial markets have fundamentally changed, okay? So that house of cards that collapsed in 2008 is not a house of cards anymore. But can we continue to have that kind of growth? No. Now, what's happening more locally? This is median sales price for Baraboo, Prairie du Sac, and Sauk City, okay? And this is from January 2012 up until September of 2023. Something happened in Sauk City. There was a big sale there. I don't know if that's okay, there was something that I don't know. When I see spikes in the data like that, I think, that's a mistake. That's an error in the data. So what do we do when we think there's an error in the data? We get rid of it. Okay? This is a cleaner picture of what's happening to housing prices here. Notice that there's, it's bouncing around, okay? There's some seasonality in this. I mean, for example, how many people want to buy a house now? Not very many. So if you learn anything from this is, if you're thinking of selling your house, don't list it in the dead of winter. Wait till spring or summer, okay? If you're buying a house, when do you want to buy a house? Now, okay? But one of the things that I wanted to kind of point out here is, that's this immediate area. You can see it kind of trending up, but I don't see that kind of spike up like in that other index. I wanted to put in a comparison here. I'm not sure this is helping very much. That just looks really confusing. But I put in Lake Delton, I put in Madison, and I put in, Middleton. Middleton, okay? I thought Madison would be way up there, but it's not. Okay, it's on the higher end, but it's not way up there. The one that's really dry is way up there is Middleton. Okay, Middleton housing is really expensive. Okay, now think about that commuting stuff that we were talking about before. Stretch commuting, commuting in. Okay, if housing prices is really high in Middleton, which is just down the road from you, I think that's more relevant than Madison. The other thing is Lake Delton. I don't know very much about Lake Delton other than I took my kids there for their birthdays. But Lake Delton is really, it bounces around a lot, okay? Let's look at this. I think this is a little bit easier the trend here. This is the average sale to the average list price. If it's below 100%, that basically means that the sale price was below the list price. Okay? If it's above 100%, that means that the sale price was above the asking price. Okay? Notice what's happening in that period post-COVID. There's a bit of an upward trend there. You can see that it kind of goes above 100% and it's fairly consistent. That's the run-up in housing prices. Okay? But what's happening in the last couple of months? It looks like it's slowing down. Now, why would the housing market be slowing down? Interest rates. It takes time for the rising interest rates to kind of work its way through the system. And I think we're finally starting to see some slowdown in the housing market. Is it going to collapse? Every indication is it's not going to collapse, but it is slowing down. Okay? This is, again, adding in those other comparison places. It's the same kind of pair. Lake Delton, though, Anybody from Lake Delton? So, okay, so it's it's the recreational properties kind of is making that kind of an odd comparison. Gotcha. That's kind of what I thought, but I wasn't sure. Okay. This is an indicator that a lot of housing folks look at is this month's supply of housing. There's kind of a benchmark here that if the month supply is below 4 months, that's an indicator that it's a seller's market. There's a housing shortage, okay? If it's more than 6 months, that suggests it's a buyer's market. You have more housing on the market than you would expect, okay? So I've highlighted 4 months. For Baraboo, Prairie du Sac, and Sauk City, for most of these time periods, it's below 4. That means that there's a housing shortage. We have less houses on the market than we would expect, or that we would want. So if it's below 4 and it's consistently below 4, that means that it's a seller's market. There's a shortage of housing. Okay, that's why this development, that's why there's all this time spent worrying about housing, and now there's a couple of developers that are coming in. That's good. Okay. Again, that's just, maybe I should have taken Lake Delton out of there because it kind of distorts the picture there. Okay. I think one of the reasons is the number of new houses that are being built. This is the number of private housing construction authorized by building permits per 10,000 people for Dane County, Sauk County, Columbia, and Iowa County. This is before the Great Recession. You can see kind of the average number that are coming on. If you think that that's kind of the average of what we would expect, the Great Recession hits. And now coming out of the Great Recession, what's the average? Dane County is catching up. Dane County is seeing more growth. But what's happening to Sauk County and Columbia and Iowa County? The number of new housing coming online, measured by building permits, is not back to where it should have been. Okay, so it's the supply of housing. The supply of housing is what's driving the shock. So seeing new development is a good thing because it's taking some of the pressure off of this. Okay, I think why are we not seeing more population growth and not more employment growth in Sauk County? I think it's housing. Housing has become a bottleneck. It's kind of preventing the economy from continuing. No, this is just private. No, it doesn't, which is a limitation. You look in Madison, and a lot of the development that's occurring is apartments. Okay? Indeed, if you look at stress, fiscal stress, housing fiscal stress, and for the purposes of this, it's defined as spending more than 35% of your income on housing. If you spend more than 35% of your housing or income on housing, you're defined as being housing stressed. Okay? Now, this is a 5-year average from the census, the 2022 census. Owner-occupied, well, California, I don't know how anybody can afford to live in California. You can see New York to Boston, you can see Miami, you can see Chicago, the Twin Cities a little bit, but Denver and Colorado is busting out, okay? But the real stress is in the renter market, okay? So this idea of focusing on developing owner-occupied, maybe we need to be thinking about the renter market, okay? And indeed, if you look at a lot of the development that's occurring in Madison, it's in the renter's market. And this is what this is suggesting. This is just kind of a zoom in a little bit closer to home. Okay, so I think about the rental market. Okay, now, what about the forecast? Okay, the only function of economic forecasts is make astrology look reasonable. Okay, We spend a lot of time and effort trying to do economic forecast. Why? Because people are trying to make decisions. Businesses are trying to make decisions. Households are trying to make decisions. We need to have some idea of what does the future look like, okay? If we think interest rates are going to be going down, we may delay making a purchase. Okay? If we think interest rates are going to go up, we may want to make those purchases now. Businesses are making the same kind of decisions. So, what I want to share with you is the Wall Street Journal does it used to be monthly, now it's quarterly. They do a survey of economists, and then they provide that information to us. This was released, Sunday morning at 5:30. Guess what I was doing Sunday morning at 9 o'clock? I was playing with the data, okay? This year, about 66 different economic forecasters provided information, responded to the Wall Street Journal survey. And what I did is I basically computed an average, okay? So I took all these forecasts provided by all of these different people and said, what's the average forecast? Because the research says that when you get a bunch of economists in the room and they're all doing economic forecasts, right? An individual forecast is probably not going to be right, but if you take an average of them all, that tends to be pretty good. So I want to look at the average. The other thing I did is I computed a standard deviation. So, and then took that standard deviation and added it to the mean. That's how high up that bar goes. And then subtracted the standard deviation. That's how low it goes. The tighter that standard deviation, that means there's more agreement in terms of what that average is. As that spreads out, that means there's more disagreement. Now look at how, as you go farther out, it gets bigger and bigger. Well, that's because as you move farther out in time, there's more noise. There's more uncertainty of what's happening, so there's going to be more disagreement there. But this is the forecast on what we think the GDP is going to be doing. Okay, the forecast for the fourth quarter 2023, it hasn't been released yet. That's why it's in the forecast, because they haven't released that data yet, is about 1.6%. As we move forward, what do we think the growth rate in GDP is going to be? Okay, on average, we think it's going to be positive. The forecast is we're not going to go into a recession. There are some that are thinking that in the second quarter of 2024, there are some that are thinking we're going to go into a very mild recession. Okay? But it's going to be very short term, because even if we go into a mild recession in the second quarter of 2024, we're going to be coming out of it fairly quickly. Okay? The forecast here is a soft landing. The forecast has gone from we're going to go into a recession. Why would we be going into a recession? Maybe. What has the Federal Reserve been doing? Upping interest rates. Why have they been upping interest rates? To slow down inflation, right? Historically, you want to crush inflation, drive the economy into a recession. That will cause inflation to go away, okay? That was the standard perception, is that, well, we're going to go into a recession. Well, you know, the Federal Reserve may have been able to pull a rabbit out of a hat. Slow the economy down, but not drive us into a recession. That's what the consensus is, okay? If you look at this longer term, 2023, 2.5%, 2024, about 1%, you know, one quarter maybe dip down, but that's a soft landing, and then we come right back out of it, okay? What about the unemployment rate? Oh, the unemployment rate's going to dip up a little bit, but remember, what is the long-term historical average? Okay, that's the long-term historical average. Even if we go into an economic slowdown, a soft landing, our unemployment rate will still be below our historical averages. Okay? If this is a recession, it's a very mild recession. Why is this? We still have a labor shortage. We still have a labor shortage. Okay? The Consumer Price Index, the magical 2% that the Federal Reserve wants to hit, the forecast is we're going to get really close to 2%, but we're probably not going to hit it. Okay? Now the question is the Federal Reserve going to back off of that 2%? Is it going to say, well, 2.3% is close enough? Okay, and back off on that. But inflation will be coming down. Now, there's lots of different ways of measuring inflation. And it turns out the Federal Reserve really doesn't like the Consumer Price Index. They really prefer to look at the Personal Consumption Expenditure Price Index. Okay? Now, the reason that we focus so much on the Consumer Price Index is because that's the inflation index that's oftentimes built into law. Okay, for example, if there's a Social Security cost of living adjustment, it's based on Consumer Price Index. The federal and state income tax brackets, you know, they tweak it every year so that there's not bracket creep. They use Consumer Price Index. But is that really the best measure of inflation? The Federal Reserve thinks no, that this is actually better. So actually, whether you use a Consumer Price Index or this index, it still looks like inflation is going to be coming down. Okay, and if you look at the Treasury or the interest rates, what's going to be happening in interest rates? One is the 10-year Treasury notes. Okay, this is essentially what is the interest that's paid on federal Treasury notes. And we think that the interest rates are going to be dipping down ever so slightly over the next 2 years. But notice as we go further out into time that bar gets wider, there's more disagreement, and that's kind of what we would expect to see. Okay, so we think interest rates are going to be dipping down a little bit. Now, this is the federal fund market. This is essentially forecasting policy. Okay, when the Federal Reserve says that it's increasing interest rates, this is the interest rate that it's increasing. And what this is that by law, banks have to have a certain amount of cash on hand at the end of the day. Okay? It's coming out of the Great Depression. Banks have to have so much money on hand at the end of the day. Some days, some banks are below that threshold. Other banks are above that threshold. So what banks do is they loan money to each other at the end of the day to make sure that banks are hitting that. The Federal Reserve determines what the interest rate is on those loans. That's the federal funds rate. That's the rate that the Federal Reserve is tweaking upwards. Okay? So this is forecasting policy. The forecast is that they will start to bring those interest rates down. The debate really right now is not whether or not the Federal Reserve is going to start dropping those rates. The question is, when are they going to start dropping those rates? Okay. Now, one of the questions that the Wall Street Journal asked is, which Fed meeting do you think that the Federal Reserve is actually going to start cutting those rates? Are they going to do it in the January meeting coming up? Probably not. The March meeting? Maybe. Much more likely they're going to do it in the April meeting or the June meeting. Is when they're going to start actually dropping it. I think that might be a bit optimistic. I think the Federal Reserve is actually going to sit in a wait-and-see mode. So it may not be until July or September that they actually start dropping. I think that this is a little bit optimistic. And some people are saying the reason the stock market is doing so well now is they're a little too optimistic about this. Okay? What is the probability of a recession in the next 12 months? This is all the respondents mapped out. The mean or the average is that there's a 39% likelihood of a recession in the next 12 months. One person's really optimistic and said it's 1%. There's a couple that are saying it's upwards of 80%. But the mean is 20 or 39%. The median is 40%. The mode, which is the most frequent, is a 55% chance of a recession. Okay, now a couple of questions that they asked. Is the federal deficit putting upward pressure on interest rates? 73% said yes. 27% said no. I don't know what those 27% are thinking. Okay? If the federal government is running a deficit, they have to fund that deficit. How do they fund that deficit? They go into the financial markets and they float bonds, treasury bills. Okay? The more that they have to do that, that's increasing the supply of available treasury notes. Okay? As the supply goes out, what do you do to attract more investors, more buyers? You have to up the interest rates. Okay? Now, this is where the Federal Reserve Bank can come into play here, is that the Federal Reserve Bank can play a role here, is because what the feds can do is that they can decide, oh, we'll buy those treasury notes. Essentially what they're doing is they're monetizing the debt. They're printing money. Now, what did the Federal Reserve Bank do when COVID first hit? They were buying up all of that deficit notes. They were buying them all up. Why? Because they wanted to keep the economy moving. Okay? Now, what is the Federal Reserve doing now? They're selling those. So you got the federal government having to issue debt to pay for the deficit, and you got the Federal Reserve Bank selling off, getting off of its books all the debt that it had bought. So I don't know what that 27% is thinking. Does the federal deficit pose a risk to the broader economic outlook or financial market in the next 3 years? 59% say yes, 41% say no. I don't know, can we continue to run the deficit at the level that we're running it? Probably not. We got to start to pull it in. Historically, how do we pull it in? Do we pull it in by cutting spending? No, we cut it down by growing the economy. When was the last time we actually had a surplus at the federal level? It was the Clinton administration. How do we do it? Because of cuts? No, we grew the economy. Okay? So if we're going to go into an economic slowdown, we can't grow our way out of it. Okay? So summary, short term, economic slowdown or a soft landing. It looks like we're going to go into a soft landing. But with all the stuff going on in the Middle East right now, we don't know. Okay? And I'm not going to say anything about the election. Downward pressure on housing prices. From a national and state perspective, we're starting to see a slowdown in the housing market. Those higher mortgage rates are finally starting to have an effect. Longer term, labor shortages will continue to persist. Okay? Increased population growth for the region. I think we're going to see more population growth for the region. One is the move to hybrid work is going to allow for greater growth in stretch commuting. Okay? So that labor shed is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay? If I only have to go into work 2 days a week, I'm willing to commute a greater distance for those 2 days than if I have to go in 5 days a week. Okay? Relatively lower housing prices in this area, particularly compared to Middleton. Okay? So if I've got a job in Middleton, and I'm looking at Middleton housing prices, and I only got to be in the office 2 days a week, guess what? Sauk Prairie looks really good to me. And why would I want to be in Sauk Prairie? You got really good schools, you got great recreation, you got community events. It's a cool place to live. That placemaking. Okay? In 2030, in the reclassification of metropolitan areas, will Sauk County become part of the Madison metropolitan area? Do you know right now that Iowa County is a metropolitan county? Do you know that Greene County is a metropolitan county? And the reason is because of the commuting patterns. There's a certain threshold of people that live in Iowa County that commute into Dane County. There's a certain number of people that live in Greene County that commute into Dane County, to such an extent that they're actually part of the Madison metropolitan area. Okay? Will Sauk County become part of that? I would think yes. Okay? Now, this has implication because guess what? your classification of a metro, non-metro influences what kind of grants, federal grants you're eligible for. Okay? If you're in a metropolitan county, guess all those USDA grants? Not eligible anymore. However, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, suddenly now you're eligible. So that classification is actually can have an influence. Okay? I have no idea how I'm doing on time, but I'm good. Questions, comments, anything that you vehemently disagree with me on?
I'm wondering how much our
Child care and labor shortage. I think it is having a major impact. I think that coming out of COVID, I think before COVID, it was an inconvenience, it was a headache. I think coming out of COVID, people are really rethinking, that hybrid work model and whatnot. So I think childcare is actually having a greater impact than it was 5 years ago.
And that wouldn't be reflected necessarily in the unemployment numbers because people are not actively looking for work?
They kind of remove themselves from the labor force. So that downward trend in the labor force participation, is that being driven by lack of childcare? No. But is it contributing to it? Probably. Okay, so childcare is a really big issue.
In the paper I read that 66% of people cannot afford to buy a new car. It takes about $120,000 income to buy a house. And rent is very expensive too. We have essential jobs in the community that will never pay that kind of an income for somebody to buy a house. A lot of people say, well, nobody wants to work. That's why those jobs are never being filled. Well, how can somebody work at a job that doesn't pay enough to buy a car, a house, and childcare, and live in a community?
That's the $64,000 question. Yeah. And that's why I kind of made a point about the renter market. Okay, the American dream is to own a house. Okay, that's not a viable option for a lot of folks. Actually, the movement to renting is actually becoming more, the number of folks that have retired and sell their house and now rent, going way up. And you would think, why would you sell maybe you sell your house and downsize? The market right now is such that that doesn't make sense. Renting makes more sense. So I think that this idea of thinking about the renter market and apartments and whatnot, I think is really important. But you raise a very fundamental question. When Wanakee was going through its major housing study, it kept asking itself, if you live in Wanakee, or if you work in Wanakee, should you be able to live in Wanakee? And guess how the community responded? Thump. Yes, of course, not if it's going to negatively affect my property values. And that's something that they really struggle with. And I think that's something that all communities are really struggling with. Okay, is that if we're going to have housing development, is it going to be that single family unit on a quarter-acre lot with a white picket fence, or is it going to be a nice apartment complex? That apartment complex has to be part of the conversation. And a lot of communities struggle with that. But it's a very important question.
And we have an organization here in town, which I'm surprised hasn't been mentioned up till now, 6-8, who wants to buy the old courts building and develop more of a campus with affordable housing and schooling to help bring people out of poverty and get them into better paying jobs. And I see that as a future for not just for the Sauk Prairie area. I see that as a future for everybody, the whole United States. Because I don't know how you can have a place, expect these people to come to work and then be in the red at the end of the day.
Yep. And you raised the question, these are jobs that people don't want to work. These are jobs that people don't want. It's not that they don't want to work, but they don't want these jobs because you can't, what do you mean $10 an hour? No benefits. I'm not going to take that job. Think of dairy farmers. How many dairy farmers that have hired work are hiring Latinos? It's because other people don't want those jobs. They want to pay more. A dairy farmer would love to be able to pay more, but they can't. There's a whole pool of labor that is willing to take these jobs, but then we have to talk about immigration policy. And nobody wants to talk about that. So that's an elephant in the room type of question.
Multiple jobs.
Yes, multiple jobs. That is that U3, marginally, they're working part-time, but they really prefer to be working full-time. That's part of that. They have to piece together a bunch of part-time jobs because they can't find a full-time job. That's becoming less and less of an issue because of the labor shortage that we've got right now. Okay, but you know, that's, if we go into a recession, I think that would be a bigger issue. But right now, it doesn't appear to be that big of an issue because the labor shortage is that severe.
Has there ever been a study on public transportation? I know I used to live in the DC metro area. The further out you live, the more affordable it is, but you're coming into the city for jobs. And so just wondering where you're kind of going to some of the further outlying areas where it's more affordable living and bringing in people to the jobs where there's the need, the critical need, and has that been looked at?
Public transportation requires a certain population threshold before it really starts to make any sense. I haven't looked at that specifically. I know that when Mayor Dave was running for re-election in Madison, he wanted to get a trolley. He kept looking at Portland and said, we need one of those. And it's like, we're not big enough. We can't afford that. We can't support that. We can barely afford the bus system that we have. And that's an area the size of Madison. So if you start to get into areas like Sauk Prairie, it becomes very, very expensive to have public transportation. So in the more rural areas, public transportation becomes a very difficult thing to kind of talk about. I don't know if you guys been talking about public transportation, if it comes up at all. It's just not doable. You have to have a certain population threshold in order to have that. So that commuting, it's car dependent. Okay, and then we come back to the you know, low-paid jobs. If you're car dependent to get to your job and it doesn't pay very much, and your car's unreliable. My daughter used to work for a big box retailer, and when she was in high school, and what she learned out of that experience is how not to manage people, because it didn't pay very well, right? And there were a couple of single parent mothers that were working there at really low wages. Their cars were unreliable. They would have a sick kid, and they missed 3 days of work in a month, and you're fired. And then they wonder why they can't retain a workforce. It's this trap that people get into.
With regards to transportation, I work with the Village of DeForest in Windsor, and for a decade they've been trying to work with Madison Metro to get a route up into like the DeForest Industrial Park, and the cost just can't even pan out. You're 10 minutes from Madison.
It's really, public transportation is extremely expensive, and you need minimum ridership. So even though a trolley would be really cool in Madison, it just doesn't work. Other questions, comments?
Do you ever track the type of jobs that you're not filling right now? What I'm referring to is skilled labor jobs versus the menial, flip a burger type job.
It's a low income. One of the job occupations, I've looked at the occupation forecast, and the occupations that we're growing the most jobs in tend to be the lowest paying jobs. And that's one of the reasons we have such a labor shortage. Is that people just don't work for those wages. immigrants will. Okay. What was the second part of your question?
Well, I was just wondering if there was a way that we could, if the jobs that are available in Sauk Prairie can't be filled because they're skilled labor jobs, why we can't have our own, say, the high school start these students on skilled, these type of.
That's one of the things that I was, when you first asked your question, I was thinking the trades. There's a real shortage within the trades. I think that we kind of oversold the need for a college education. We kind of set the signal that if you don't go to college, you're a failure. And I think we went overboard on that. I also think that for a lot of smaller communities, having shop classes is extremely expensive. And under revenue limits and limited state aids, a lot of school districts were looking at their budget and they were going, do we maintain these really expensive shop classes that are exposing kids to the trades, or do we invest in another AP English teacher? They went that route. So the kids are not getting exposed to it. So when I see the high school here investing in shop classes, I think that's excellent because the kids are being exposed to that. You don't have to go to college. There are the trades, there are these other jobs. I can remember I swung a hammer for my brother-in-law when I was in college, and the people that always drove the newest and most expensive pickup trucks were the electrician and the plumber. These can be good paying jobs. They can be really good paying jobs. My ex-brother-in-law was a welder. High-end welder. He would travel the country to work on nuclear power plants, that kind of certification. He'd work like a devil for 3 weeks, then he'd be off for 2 weeks, and he was making $250,000 a year.
Could tech schools get involved with high schools on some level to thinking outside the box?
There was a high school up in the north central part of the state that did that. They partnered with the local technical school. And what it was is that every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, kids would get on a bus and go to the technical school. It failed. Think back to when you were in high school. You were part of the kids that got on the bus and left campus. Think about peer pressure in high school. It didn't work. Nobody wanted to be associated with the bus kids. They were quite proud. They thought this is a great idea. In paper, it worked, but they didn't think about high school kids and how high school kids think. So great idea, think about it, but there's no magic bullet.
Thank you, Steve. I will leave you with this because I know we have Shauna here with Madison College. Madison College is in our high school, everything from planning to daily to youth trips. You heard Todd and Casey talk about relationship building and collaboration. One of the proudest things I have for Sauk Prairie School District is out of the entire CISA 5 districts, which, John, you'd have to help me, I think is Middleton, Blackbird, Sauk, all the surrounding communities. We have more youth apprentices going into local manufacturers, skilled trades from Sauk Prairie School District than any other district. And those are districts double our size. And that is due to relationship building and unique partnerships. So it is occurring. I thank you so much. My final question for you, have economists done any type of research looking at those entry-level jobs, minimum wage, you can't afford to live. But where's the price point where people saw differences when they started paying X?
There is, United Way has what's called the Alice Project. And what the Alice Project does is they've worked with a couple of, I want to say Harvard, I forget where the academics are, that have actually gone county by county and estimated what a livable wage is. And we can get the data for Sauk County. And a lot of communities that's been a real eye-opener, because a lot of folks thought, oh, $15 an hour is a good paying job, until they look at this Alice data and realize, oh, you can't afford to live here on that. Now, you get 10 economists in the room, and they're going to get 10 different answers, and everybody's going to go, well, they should have done it this way, they should have done it that way. But I think that Alice data is an excellent starting point for that conversation.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for sharing. Join me in giving him a nice round of applause.
Thank you.
Yep, this is way better than mine.
Thank you.
Board Chair Tim Kummer is here. If you have questions for them, I'll ask them to come up at the front of the room, and we're happy to answer any questions about local projects. Thank you so much. Roxy.
Thank you. And again, we're really happy that we're able to partner with the Chamber since 2006, I think it's been quite a few years that we've been able to bring this event to the community. We're so happy to see the turnout that we have had today. And again, thanks Mark for recording this. I know that there are people that are live streaming it this morning, and having the recording available will be very helpful for moving it on to other people. So we have a couple door prizes to give away, and we'll call on Vanna Gina here. Here we go. So our first one is to Amanda Miller from Consumers Club. And the second one goes to Sarah Carlson, Sketchworks Architecture.
She had to leave early, but so you can either redraw or I'll put it to her.
Alex Andrews, Sauk Prairie Chamber. And again, thank you so much. If you'd like to grab a treat on your way out, please feel free to do so. This facility has been a fabulous addition to our community. We're very happy to be able to do things. Thank you.